Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Patrick today. Patrick's an individual that reached out to the show after he had heard episode 566 with Jason, who had an interesting encounter out there in Idaho. And Patrick is pretty familiar with that area that was referred to in that episode. So I got to reach out and share what I've experienced in that same area. So Patrick, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to share. I always love it when there's a person that reaches out to me and they're like, yeah, that one episode you had is pretty dead on, because I can tell you some stuff too about the same area. So, I'm going to go ahead and hand things right over to you, Patrick, and you're welcome to, take us back to what we need to know and when you started to experience some things out there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm Patrick. I'm 34. I've lived here in Idaho, in the Coeur d'Alene area for my entire life, and I've spent all of that going hunting and fishing and spending all sorts of time in the outdoors, like hiking and all that stuff. So I've spent plenty of time outside doing stuff, and I never really experienced anything that always stood out to me as unexplainable. Like, there's weird stuff that has happened, but I've always just sort of chalked it up as, oh, it's probably this or probably that. But I've always been a believer in that Bigfoot or Sasquatch, or there's something out there, and it's totally possible that there's something out there that we just don't know about. Because we're learning about new stuff all the time, and to think that we know everything about everything is kind of a little arrogant. So I always love the idea that there's stuff that we don't know about. And I haven't had anything in particular happen that made me really think about this being in my area until July of last year, when I was up camping. And every year, and it's a tradition, my mom and I, my entire life, we've always made it a tradition for 2 weeks in July, over like 4th of July weekend, we'd go up camping, and we live like homeless people for 2 weeks, but it's just to get away from the city, the lights, the sounds, the fast moving everything. And it's just sort of our reset every year. And we've always taken a family vacation. And it used to be my mom and my dad and myself and my brother, but my dad since passed a couple of years ago. And so we just sort of want to continue on the tradition. And in all of our time up there, we've experienced odd things, but we've always made up an explanation for it. But because we've never really, I'm a very analytical kind of person, and so I always try to just come up with the 40 things it would be before it's Sasquatch, and I always just sort of land on something, even though I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I guess I'll get into what actually happened this past year. So we were up camping, and referring to, and we camp in the exact spot that Jason from episode 566 was talking about. And so I saw the thumbnail for that episode, and it said Sandpoint, Idaho. I'm like, well, we camp there, so I really wanted to listen to that episode. And hearing him describe like where he was at, I'm like, that's our campsite that we always camp in. And then after our experience, I was like, wow. So people are experiencing things right where we've been for my entire life. So maybe the stuff we've been experiencing isn't a moose or a bear or anything like that. So my mother and I tried to go up and get that spot that he was talking about. But for some reason this year, the woods were absolutely packed full of campers. And it was a really good year for huckleberries. So I would imagine a lot of huckleberry pickers were out there. So we were sort of forced to go up the mountain another couple of miles. And we found another campsite up on a ridge. And this campsite doesn't get camped in that often because it's way up off the river. It's on the opposite side of the mountain road that goes. There's only one road that goes up that mountain on that river, and most of the campsites are right on the river, but this one is one of those that's not. And so it's always open, but it was sort of our last resort, and we camped there, and it was actually a really nice spot. It's right on a ridge, like a big old ridge coming straight down, goes all the way down to the river. And there's an abundance of bear grass on this ridge. So I called it Bear Grass Ridge. And we set up camp. We had a couple of tents, and it's probably, I don't know, probably 100 feet by 100 feet campground. Like, it's big, it's open, and it's not next to anybody, which was really nice. Because the campsite that Jason talked about is right next to a lot of people. It's one campsite and then a little road that goes down to another campsite, another little road that goes down to another one. Not this one. This one's all by itself on this ridge. And so we thought, you know what, maybe we won this time. But we were there for a couple of nights, and then my aunt and her fiance decided to join us for about a week, which doesn't usually happen. It was nice to, have the campsite be a little bit more full than just my mom and myself. And so it was probably, we get up there on a Thursday. So it was probably about I would say a Tuesday night that all of this happened. We were sitting by the fire as most people do. And my aunt and her fiance decide to call it a night, probably around, I'd say 10 or 11 o'clock. The temperature drops like crazy out there. It's 90 during the day, and then it drops down to probably 45 or 50 at night. And after being so hot, turning to that cold, it makes you want to go inside and bundle up pretty quick. So they got done with the fire, and they went straight to bed. And they sleep in one of those campers that goes up on top of the truck. And my mother and I are just sitting in a tent. And we're in a little tent where we have a little card table set up, and we're playing card games and stuff. And, we don't really have a time that we go to bed. Like, there's times that we'd sit there and play games until the sun came up. And that was one of those nights where it was probably 1:30 or 2 in the morning, and we're just playing a card game. And we have some lights in the tent so that we can see everything. The lights are powered by a generator, and we have the generator we have set up probably about 50 feet away. We have put it just outside of camp so that it's not making too much noise for my aunt and her fiance to sleep and stuff like that. But it is our generator. It's a cheap little thing, it's not quiet, so it rattles and it makes a pretty loud ruckus. I think that's a fairly important thing to note. Is this thing is not quiet, and we're not necessarily quiet either. We're laughing, we're hollering, we're having a great time, and we're not being rowdy, but we're not being quiet either. And so about 1:30, we're just playing cards, and all of a sudden, from it was behind my mother, and it was sort of off to. We're sitting across the table from each other, and it was slightly off to my right. That we hear this. I don't want to say it was blood curdling, but it almost sounded like it was the loudest scream I've ever heard in my life. It stopped us both in our tracks for sure. And what it sounded like, the only way I could describe it is it sounded like a woman, like, running down a hill into, like, a war cry, running down a hill, and it was like a kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but it was longer than that. It's definitely sustained. It was so loud. It could have been 50 feet away. It could have been right next to our tent, but it certainly wasn't more than 100 feet away. And it was so loud. And the crazy thing is, my mother and I both got to experience this, and I am thrilled, because nobody would think anything if it was just me that heard this. And it was one of those things. We immediately were like, what the heck was that? Well, we didn't say heck, but we used some more colorful language, but we're like, what is that? And I immediately go and grab my pistol, like that's going to do anything. But this sounded like a very large person. Like, imagine that it's a woman, but like pitch it down and make it where it sounds a lot bigger than a person. And being that I'm super analytical, I'm immediately trying to figure out what this could be. I'm going through all the animals that we have in our area, and we have an abundance of animals in North Idaho that can make odd screams and odd noises, anywhere from an elk to a bobcat to an owl, coyotes. They all make some noises, but there was a lung capacity on this that, I mean, you would expect from a person, but it sounded so much bigger. And I immediately got the feeling that it was really angry at us. Like, it was like telling us to shut up, like an angry neighbor yelling at you to turn your music down. And my mother, on the other hand, talking to her afterwards, got a different feeling from this scream. She felt that it was sort of a, like, hey, do you mind? Like just sort of letting us know that it was there. And I did not feel that way. I felt like it was very upset. And so we're sitting there, and we grab our flashlights, and we have a couple of pretty high-powered flashlights, like 6,000 to 9,000 lumen flashlights. And we unzip all the windows in our tent to, like, shine out there and look around, because, I'm expecting this thing to come barreling into our camp and, attack the tent or start wreaking havoc. Like, this thing sounded like it was about ready to want to like kill us. And we're shining the lights around, and I've got my big flashlight in one hand and my gun in the other, like it's going to do something, but there was nothing. There was no eye shine. We never heard footprints or footsteps. We never heard any rustling in the trees, nothing. It was just a single scream and then nothing. And so I'm sitting there just racking my brain. I can't wrap my head around it. And I'm trying not to freak my mom out. She's already, having a small moment to herself of, I don't know what that was, but I don't feel right anymore. And the whole time that we're all sitting there trying to think about things, I'm wondering how my aunt and her fiance didn't hear anything, because it also came from about 50 feet away from their truck, but they were dead asleep. They never heard a thing. And that's another thing that I'm so glad that my mother was there to experience this with me, because people would question the fact that, oh, there's 2 other people in camp and they didn't hear anything. It's like, yeah, I don't know how they didn't wake up, but they were zonked out apparently. But yeah, so that was that experience. And that is the only experience in the woods that I've never been able to explain away as something. But having that experience sort of changes the context around some other things that have happened up there. And going back and thinking about stuff, like maybe stuff has been happening my entire life up there. But we've always been camped next to the river up until this point. So the river it's a really shallow river, so it's pretty loud being camped right next to the river. It drowns out a lot of sounds. But when I was younger, when it was my mom, my dad, and myself, we would always hear rocks and stuff moving in the river. And my dad was always like, oh yeah, just, the current of the river is just moving rocks. But it was like boulders that were being moved. You could hear them move, like, it wasn't just like shifting. It was, I don't know, it sounded like they were being tossed in, but without the splash. Like just really loud, like clunks, like rocks hitting rocks. And every once in a while, I would think that I would hear talking or voices coming from near the river. But I've always explained that is the river can make all sorts of weird noises, the way that the sound can come up and hit you. And I've heard people talk about how it can sound like there's talking coming from the river. So I've just always explained it away. But assuming that there is something out there, something large that sounds kind of like a human, but bigger than a human, and I've experienced these weird sounds that sound kind of human, but I could never make out the voices or anything. Like, maybe that's something. I explained it away before, but maybe that's something. And there was another time we were camped in the same area that Jason was talking about, just one campsite over. And it was, I call it the sand pit, where we had a big flood a few years ago, and it washed up a lot of sand into this campsite. So it's kind of like you're camping on a beach. But we were getting ready to leave after our 2-week stay one time, and there was no wind. It was the most still day I think we experienced up there. Not even a breeze. And we're getting ready to leave, and a mother and her, like, 2 or 3 kids came in and wanted to go swimming down at the river, and asked if it was okay if they did that while we packed up and left. And we were just chit-chatting, making small talk. And all of a sudden, I hear the loudest cracking of a tree going down just out of sight from camp, but down by the river. And I see the top of a very large aspen start to go down. And I was like, that is weird, because there's no wind, no breeze, and I can tell just by looking at the top of this tree, it's a pretty healthy tree. And so after our heartbeats relaxed a little bit, I decided to go and look at what happened and what made this aspen go down. And I go over and I look at this tree, and it's not uprooted, but it's split at the base, like it was. I mean, I know that this can happen, but it seemed so weird that there would have had to have been a force that had pushed this tree over. Just the way that it had a diagonal split at the base. So the crack might have already been there, but there's no way that this tree fell over without something having pushed it. This was a large tree. This was the biggest aspen in the entire area. And so I initially explained it away as it was probably a bear, or maybe a moose or something had pushed against it. Like, who knows? But considering what we heard this past year, maybe it wasn't. And then again this past year, I guess I'm all over the place, but going back to what happened this past year, as a couple of days after the scream happened, I'm getting this. I have this terrible feeling up there that we're being watched. I just have this knot in my stomach. I was not relaxed for probably 5 days after this happened. I don't want to venture more than 100 feet away from camp, but I don't feel good about anything. I'm ready to pack it in, but there's 3 other people vacationing with me that really don't seem to feel the same way that I do about this. Like, my mother chalked it up as, well, that was a weird, creepy experience. And my aunt and her fiance were just more, they didn't experience anything, so they didn't care. But like 2 days after this happened, I decided to venture, probably a couple 100 feet away from camp, up on the little hill that the campsite is nestled up to, going up the ridge a little bit. And the way this ridge is set up is we're on a little bit of a plateau, and then the ridge drops down probably 300 feet away from camp on either side. And I'm just sort of walking up on the ridge a little bit, and I hear what sounds like a truck and trailer coming down the mountain on the road that's off to our right. And I was like, okay, like, probably people will take their quads up there all the time, but it seemed kind of loud for a truck and trailer. It sounded further away, but it sounded louder than it should be. And when I say it sounded like a truck and trailer, when you hear a trailer, you can hear like the metal clanking and banging a little bit. That's what I thought I heard. And then as I'm listening to it getting louder and louder, I noticed that it's not necessarily following the path of the road. It's actually coming up the ridge at me. And I'm sitting there just intently listening to this to make sure that I'm hearing what I'm hearing. And as soon as I confirm in my head that, oh, this isn't following the road, this can't be a truck and trailer, what sounds like the metal clanking and banging turns into really heavy labored breaths, like really deep, like like that. And I know that moose can do that, and bear and stuff like that, if they're spooked and trying to tear up a ridge, can be like that. But I immediately had this feeling, and it's only been a day and a half or 2 days since that crazy loud scream. So that's sitting in the back of my head too, to where I'm like, okay, if I don't move right now, something bad is going to happen to me, because it sounds like it's coming straight at me, but I can't see anything. And I'm sitting there, and I said, I'm gonna back up. So I back up about 40 feet, and I see my mother right behind me, just leisurely picking huckleberries. And I just turned, I was like, hey, I was like, we probably should go back to camp. I was like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, what? I was like, do you hear that thing going up the ridge right in front of us? Like, and she's like, no. I'm like, how do you not hear this? It was so loud. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so, while that could be a moose or a bear or some other, or an elk, in the context of what had just happened up there, that freaked me out pretty good. And I guess that was sort of the last of the big things that we experienced up there. A couple days after that, like it was probably the day before we were going to leave, we saw something big and black. I wouldn't say really big. Probably the size of a small black bear or a large raccoon or something, fall out of a tree. It was up near the top of a tree, probably 150 feet away from camp, give or take. And we hear a twig snap from that direction, and we turn, and we just see at the last second something black, like falling down from the tree out of our line of sight. So, like a couple really smart people, we went to go investigate with a fly swatter and a pistol, and we didn't see anything. There was no signs of anything having hit the ground hard or anything like that. I just chalked that up as it was a raccoon or a bear or something. But it's easy to explain everything away when I'm so analytical. I'm always trying to come up with answers for things. I don't like not knowing things. So I kind of obsess over things until I have an answer that I'm happy with. And when it comes to this scream that happened, I still haven't found an answer, other than maybe it's the thing that I've believed in my whole life and just never thought that I would experience, never thought that I had been experiencing it. It's sort of the last thing that I could use to explain it. It's the last thing I ever thought I would use, but I don't know what else this could be.
That is wild, Patrick. Just it must have been such a crazy realization after hearing that account and then realizing, oh yeah, kind of makes sense now. Was there ever a like a camp host or a ranger in that campground area?
We never saw a ranger. So we always have a ranger come through our camp at least once or twice. In the other camp down the mountain a little bit. This year we never had a ranger come through. We never had anyone show up. We definitely would have asked if there were any animals in the area that were known for making unusual sounds from what they would normally make. Because that's what we landed on too, was just trying to explain it away and put our minds at ease a little bit. Was, what if it's just an animal that isn't making its normal noise? You know, like sometimes cats try to bark and dogs try to purr. Just the unusual type of thing. But as loud as this thing was, I've heard cougars cry. I've heard or scream. I've heard foxes screaming. I've heard just about every sound that every animal makes out there. I've even heard deer bark. And I don't know any animal that could have made the sound that we heard other than a person. But a person, it wouldn't make any sense for them to scream the way that they did just one time. Like if it's a person that lives up there in one of the houses that's a ways away from us, if they want us out of there, why wouldn't they do more to try to get us out of there? Why just scream one time? Why not try to mess with us? Why not throw rocks or whatever at us and really try to spook us out of there? It was just one of the weirdest things, and we never had anyone come up that we could ask about. It was we definitely felt like we were alone on that little island.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with all the different weird sounding owl noises. I mean, it sounds like this was not anything close to an owl at all.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't even say the only way it could be an owl. There's no way this could have been an owl, but we even talked about, like, well, maybe it was an owl that flew right next to our tent and made a weird screech, but there's no owls that make that noise. I know they have a wide vocal range, but this sounded like a woman that is 7 or 8 feet tall that got really mad and screamed at us out of frustration or anger and then just went away. It doesn't make any sense. And an owl can't sound like that. But yeah, I went through I was freaking my mom out for like 4 hours, just going through. It's not an owl. Coyotes can sound weird, but nothing like that. Wolves, yeah, bobcats, cougars, none of it fit the bill. And it had to have had a large lung capacity to produce the sound that it produced in the resonance that it produced it in. Like, this was a large animal.
The next day or the days after it, did you notice anything out of the ordinary around the campsite, like broken trees or anything weird like that, bent over trees, anything?
Okay, so I forgot to mention this. We were scouting for huckleberries a couple of days after that, and we had gone up the ridge, and we made sure we kept camp in sight. But we'd gone up the ridge, and there's a large grove of younger, I would say probably like tamaracks. They're either tamarack or some young fir of some sort. And we noticed, I should say I noticed that there was a single tree, and these are, I'd say they're probably 8 inches to 10 inches around. Like, they're probably 60 to 70 feet tall. Like, they're trees. They're not twigs or saplings or anything. But I noticed one, it was broke off about, I don't know if it was, I'd say about 8 feet up in the air. It was just like a clean snap, but on top of it was balanced the top of the tree. Like the other 50 feet of the tree was just laid across where it was broken, and it was balanced there. Like right in the middle of it. There's no way that it fell like this. And there was no other trees around that were broken for that could have just snapped off and landed on this already snapped off tree. Like it looked like it was placed there, but it was like 10 feet up. And I took some pictures and a video of it that I can send to you if you want. And it doesn't make any sense for that to be that way. And I thought that was one of the weirdest things But that was the only thing that looked out of place around camp.
Yeah, that is extremely weird. Yeah, if you don't mind sending it over, I'd love to take a look at it. That sounds just the fact that it's just kind of weirdly
Yeah,
balanced is very strange.
yeah. And it wasn't like the smaller tree breaks, the 2 or 3 inch trees that are always bent over. Like this thing was, it was a full size tree, and it was just snapped clean. And it's possible that it snapped during like snowpack or whatever like that. I know that we get some pretty heavy winters up in those mountains. Being that it's down in a valley, it just accumulates snow to where that could have been what snapped the tree, but that's not what balanced it on its own stump.
Mm.
That was pretty weird.
That's very weird. After that whole experience, did you at any point start experiencing weird things at home or things that didn't really make sense at all? Anything like that?
Not really. I No, nothing really seemed to have followed me home. It I think the only weird thing is just the way I keep thinking about things, and I just keep trying to convince myself of it being other things than it probably is. But yeah, nothing really seemed to follow me.
So when you say you keep thinking about it, it's just that is it more you're trying to like just logically explain away what happened?
Yeah,
Okay.
I want the truth to whatever it is. There is a truth to whatever this thing is, and it bugs me not knowing what it is. And I think I'm slowly starting to accept that I probably won't know what this was exactly, and I just sort of need to accept that it probably was a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, and I need to be okay with that. And I just need to keep that in mind moving forward. I shouldn't try to find answers when I already have one.
Yeah, that definitely that does make sense. I asked that because I found that sometimes people in similar situations they end up getting drawn back to the area, and it's just it's a really weird commonality that's started to come out when I talk to people. They end up getting drawn back to the same area, almost inexplicably. It's just they start having very vivid dreams about the area. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I actually I think we're planning on going back up there to camp again this year. And I don't know if that's a crazy thing or just sort of the investigative side of what I want. I think I'm playing with fire a little bit. Because if it screamed if it sees us again, how mad is it going to be? Or if it's even still up there. But I think we're going to try to go up there and camp either in that spot or in the spot that was in Jason's episode. I don't know that I want to experience again, but I don't want to be afraid of camping either. I'm drawn back there because I want an answer, and I think I need to be able to investigate it a little bit more. And it's hard to investigate a single scream. If it would have done it twice, then I could create a pattern, but there's no pattern there. I want to find a motive. I'm super analytical and logical in the way that I think, and I want to know the truth, whatever it may be. And so I guess I am drawn to it, but I haven't had any dreams or any. I definitely know the supernatural side of some people's encounters, and I guess I've been fortunate enough to not have experienced that. up to this point.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing. It can change very quickly. I do understand the whole being drawn to it, wanting to figure out what it is. Once you know that there is something out there, and you know the exact area where it's at, and then you want to. All you can think about is going back to it, because now you know where it is, and I can be the one that figures this out.
Yeah, like it's so close I can touch it. Why wouldn't I at least make an attempt to do so?
Exactly. It's just it is a very, very strange phenomenon. But I would say I think you're handling it in the right way, where it sounds like, it wouldn't be just you going back out there, which is good. It sounds like, maybe even your mom would be going out with you again, perhaps.
Yeah, if I don't go, she's going by herself, and I won't let that happen. So
right.
So I was like, you know what? I'll go with you. I'll probably take something. We'll probably have to take some precautions this time around. Like, if something else screams at us or something weird happens, like, we should probably not stay for another week and a half after that. Should probably just pick up and, like, all right, well, I have all the stuff I need. I'm going to go ahead and go analyze from the safety of my home. But yeah, I don't know if I'm crazy for going back up there, but I don't want to. The fact that I took it as a really threatening scream, or just a really hostile one, and my mother did not feel that way, puts me at ease in the sense that my subjective feeling is like a me problem, and maybe it really was just hey, stop making so much noise, like, we're up here, as opposed to a threat. But I don't want to, if that wasn't a threat, I don't want to experience what a threat would be. I don't want to hear it growl at me like it did with Jason. I don't want to experience any more hostility than I feel that I've already experienced. And putting myself out there, I'm opening myself up to it. So I don't know how to prepare for that to happen, but I think I'm just going to have the car in a position that I can get into it and leave if I need to.
Exactly. And I think it would be wise to be aware of any sounds that you hear in that area. I'm thinking back to Jason's interview, and just how he had heard some weird things in the area.
The emergency beacon?
Yeah, the beacon, and almost seemed to be drawing him to an area. And just always definitely be aware of that. You never want to be drawn into the woods by a weird sound, or something saying your name, or anything like that can be the beginning to a really bad story, for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm fairly self-aware out there, and I definitely know when I'm the guy that makes the bad choices in the horror movie.
Right.
And I'm just like, exactly. Why am I walking into the middle of the woods when I should be going to my car?
Yeah. But it is very interesting, and I would say, if you do decide to go back up there, definitely stay in touch. I would love to hear if something does happen again in that area, and it would be very interesting.
Yeah, we're going to invest in some trail cams. I know that it's probably more just to put us at ease, but I know that these things don't ever show up on trail cams. But we're going to probably invest in 4 of them or so, and put them up in different areas, just surrounding camp and whatnot. Just if they want to stay away from trail cams, if we surround camp with trail cams, then they won't come into camp. That's my mindset. That makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that's the easiest way to get something to not come in your camp is to put up some game cams, because most people think it's the IR tends to keep them away, and you could always audio recorders are pretty inexpensive now. I mean, you can get a Tascam intro one for, I want to say, less than 100 now, and that's something you could also
Yeah.
have in your camp and just recording all night long, and see if you're able to capture something. But yeah.
That would be awesome if I could capture that scream.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, since all of this happened, I did watch, and I don't really watch like Finding Bigfoot and stuff like that, but there was a single episode that aired on TV that took place in the same area that we were in. It's just a single mountain over from where we were. It's called Jack Osborne's Night of Terror, Bigfoot, where he was investigating up in the Priest Lake area, which it really is. It's only like 15 miles from where I was camping. And towards the end of that episode, spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it, they do hear a scream way off in the distance that doesn't sound unlike what we heard up there. So I can't really describe the scream in the capacity that we heard it, but on that particular show, they did capture something that sounded similar. It wasn't the same, but very similar, and it's the only thing I've ever heard that sounded similar to what we've heard. And it was crazy that it happened in the same area that we were in. So I don't think that goes without saying.
That's really interesting. I did not know that was the truth be told, I haven't actually watched. I need to watch that, check it out. But I've talked to one of the researchers that was involved with it, Kevin Llewellyn. But yeah, that sounds that's interesting that it's that close to where you guys were at. So definitely have to check that out. I think you can listen or you can watch that on like Discovery Plus or one of those type of network type deals. But
yeah, I think it's on Discovery Plus.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Patrick, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and for sharing what you've experienced so far in this area. And it seems like such an interesting area. If there's people listening to this and they've also experienced things in the same area, definitely encourage people to leave a comment on the video, or they can always send me an email directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. But just want to say thank you for coming on the show tonight, and hopefully we'll stay in touch, and who knows what you might be able to be involved with next.
Yeah, I'm excited, and thank you for having me and allowing me to share my experience. I'm usually just a lurker, and I watch the podcast and listen to people's stories and just take down the information. But as soon as it happened where I'm always at, I felt the need to put it out there and sort of confirm that there's something weird happening up there all of a sudden in the past couple of years. And the more people that come out and talk about it, it's important. All that data, all that information coming out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Everything, every little piece of data definitely helps in the long run, for sure.
For sure.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.